You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I'm a hoarder who needed an outlet to talk about this unusual and isolating mental illness. And because my hoarding is secret, I started this podcast to talk about it. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? Things here are fine. It is cold, but I am reasonably cheerful, and I slept really well last night, which should not be underestimated. So today I am talking about what to do with clothes if you gain or lose weight. I also have some housekeeping. I have a success of the week and a weird dilemma of the week. And at the end, I have a shout out to a tip from another podcaster that is well worth listening to.
Let's start with some housekeeping.
So, housekeeping. If you are a Dehoarding darling, you may have seen that February's Dehoarding Darling post is now live, so you can check that out, including extra questions from Jan and Harriet last month. I also have Dehoarding Accountability Zoom sessions coming up. There are 2 a month, basically, always on a Sunday evening UK time and a Friday morning UK time. That is to account for different time zones so that different people in different parts of the world can join whichever one suits them best. If you would like to sign up for one of those or become a Dehoarding darling, you can find everything you need at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/links, as in LINKS, not as in teenage boys deodorant when I was also a teenager.
It's time for the success of the week and the weird dilemma of the week.
So, success of the week and weird dilemma of the week. A few weeks ago, my success of the week was that I had sorted like 100 pieces of unopened post. And I was trying to work out a system that would work for incoming post because rudely, even when you sort it all out, more comes through the door. It's unacceptable really, but there's not a lot you can do about it. And I needed some kind of container. I figured I would try anyway. Some kind of container that was big enough to hold a day or two's post, but not so big that it would just allow itself to become the new thing that gave me an excuse to never open post. So the success is that when I was trying to work out precisely what kind of container would work, my first thought was, what do I have that's the right size for this? Not, what can I buy? And that's quite revolutionary for me. Normally, any kind of container need would be met with exciting, yay, I could buy a container. And that not only was that not something I particularly had to resist, it wasn't even my first thought. My first thought was, okay, what does shoebox do it? I know I've got a shoebox over there. What about that plastic thing? And I'm testing out a few things, but I haven't bought anything new for it, and that's very, very cool. My phrase of the year last year was make do, and it feels like some of that hard work has started to really embed in my brain, and that's very exciting. My weird dilemma of the week. Years ago, I bought a folding stool. Now, I can only assume that in the days prior to buying it, I had been at some kind of summer fair or festival or somewhere that didn't have enough places to have a sit down. Because I remember seeing this folding stool in a shop and going, oh yeah, that would be great for when there's nowhere to have a sit down. And the thing that sold it to me was that it said it was so small, this folding stool, that it would fit in a pocket. And I thought, that's ideal. And like the box looked bigger than any pockets I've got, but it was certainly small and could easily go in a backpack or something. So I bought this folding stool for probably £5 without having the very obvious in retrospect realization that if a stool was small enough to fold into some people's pockets, it was almost certainly not big enough for my bum. And I got it home and I opened it, and this thing is tiny. It is a folding stool for fairies. And I think most adults would struggle to sit on this thing. Plus, it was tiny in height as well. You may as well just sit on the floor. It was an absolute waste of money. And so I thought, at the time, I remember thinking, oh, well, that's obviously just a charity shop donation. That will be fine. And then, for whatever reason, it never ended up leaving the house. And so I found it again recently in somewhat poorer condition than it had originally been. It was at the bottom of a pile. Who knows what had been on top of it? Who knows how many times I'd accidentally kicked it around, that kind of thing. So I thought, right, if I clean this up, it can still go to the charity shop. And of course, that kind of cleaning it up was the block. I'm trying to clean everything up. I have a lot of things to clean up. And this was at the bottom of all my priority lists. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, this folding stool for fairies and elves that needed a really good, wash still sat in my kitchen. But this time by the sink, in the optimistic hope that I would clean it up. But I wasn't cleaning it up. And I was having a real dilemma about this thing because I didn't want to throw it away. It would serve some elven gathering somewhere, potentially. But much as I wanted it to go to use, I just did not have the capacity or the energy to do what was needed for it to be able to go to a charity shop. And that was my weird dilemma. And I was stuck with this thing by the sink for weeks. I came to the conclusion, ultimately, that if I was going to ever find the extra energy to clean it up so that I could donate it, I would have done by now. It was very cheap in the first place. This was not something that would make a charity shop a fortune. The packaging was all battered. And so I threw the folding stool for elves and fairies that needed considerable attention to be donatable into the bin, and I feel fine about that decision. It may make you uncomfortable to hear that I did that when it could have been saved and it could have been used, but I feel fine about that decision. I haven't regretted it. I feel relieved that it's one thing less to do. So today I am going to talk about what to do with clothes if we lose or gain weight. What I am not going to do is say that losing weight should be everybody's goal. I'm not going to talk about the positives or negatives or the merits of gaining or losing weight. None of that. That's not of interest to me. It's purely a practical thing. If you go down a clothes size or go up a clothes size, what on earth do you do with your clothes that no longer fit but recently fitted? And this has come to mind because I have lost some weight in the last few months and have recently gone down a clothes size. And it's a strange thing because the weight loss itself, whatever, not of interest. But I'm now in a position where I have too many clothes in a size that no longer fits, a few clothes in a size that does fit, and I've been unsure how to deal with that on a stuff level. I am somebody whose weight goes up and down and up and down, mostly with little intervention from me. And I had previously got rid of a lot of things that didn't fit. So I had got rid of some clothes that would have fitted me now, that didn't at the time. So the first thing that feels really important to say is I do not regret that. You might need to hear me say that. I got rid of some things that might have fitted me now that didn't at the time I got rid of them. And I don't regret getting rid of them, even though they would fit me now. I don't regret it. I know I did it for good reasons. There's nothing in there that I'm thinking, oh, I wish I could wear that particular top. No, they went for good reasons, and I will deal with my new situation now in the best way I can. So why is it hard, first of all? Why is it hard to know what to do with your clothes if you go up or down a clothes size or two? I think firstly because for people with brains that work like ours, getting rid of clothes can feel overwhelming, painful. We might associate our clothes with our identity or with our achievements. You know, I've got that suit when I got the top job or something like that. And there's a lot of what if thinking in why we keep clothes. So what I've been thinking about and what we all need to think about is how do we reduce excess while making sure we're not left short, we're not left without what we might need. Clothes often hold associations or memories or even emotions. Like that's what I was wearing when I met my partner for the first time. Or that's what I was wearing the day I was fired from my job. It can be negative as well as positive. And if you hoard, those associations can be even more powerful, which can make it incredibly difficult to discard stuff, even if it no longer fits. And then we also need to add to that, it's hard because if we've recently lost or gained weight, we don't know where our end point will be. Will we be back at our previous size? Will we lose or gain more? Because again, sometimes losing or gaining weight happens deliberately. Sometimes it doesn't. So it's not something that's within a lot of our control. And I think a big part of working this out is starting by acknowledging that we have those feelings and reactions and kind of honouring them, even if they're not entirely rational, but just saying, okay, I see that I don't want to get rid of that because I associated it with that event where I felt really happy and loved. Just notice it's there, acknowledge it. But also, what can we do with our stuff that reflects the changes in our life? Whether we feel great or awful about losing or gaining weight, it's a new stage. Things do change. As I talked about in the episode on impermanence with Jan, nothing stays the same. So honouring that journey, I hate the word journey. Programs like X Factor have ruined it. And it's okay if we feel scared at the thought of letting go of some clothes that no longer fit us. It's okay if we feel sad about it or even angry. When we start to look into that, why do we feel those things? Is it because we're scared of what's next? Is it because we want to hold on to something from the past? Is it a fear of future scarcity? Then we can start to tackle some of that thinking, and whether it's helpful to us, whether it's completely rational, and start to address it when we've identified what the resistance is. So why are we tempted to keep clothes that no longer fit? I think one is fear of needing them again. What if I gain or lose weight back? I know that I gain weight and lose weight and gain weight and lose weight. And what if that happens and I don't have enough? And there was something in the shout out I did at the end of a recent episode, it might have even been last week's, which was a little clip from the Declutter Hub podcast. And Leslie said something about the vast majority of things in our homes should be things that we use now. The vast majority. And that wording hit me a bit because the vast majority of things I'm surrounded with are just in case things or nostalgia things or things I'm keeping for other reasons than I use them. Yes, we might lose or gain weight again. That thing might come back in fashion. But if the vast majority of the things surrounding us are things that we do not, cannot, will not use, I think that's an imbalance in our homes that we need to look at a bit more critically. Another reason we keep things that no longer fit is emotional attachment, like I was talking about. My mum got me that top, or I associate that cardigan with my days at university when I was really happy, or I associate those jeans with the feeling I used to get when I wore them because they were perfect for me. But if we get rid of the thing that represents that memory, that attachment, that association, that doesn't mean the original thing that made us feel that way didn't happen. We still felt great in those jeans, whether we own them now or not. We still felt really loved and happy at university, even if we don't have the cardigan anymore. We still got a gift from our mum, even if we don't own the top anymore. This is really key, for me at least, in allowing myself to break the chains to some of the things that I keep because of that kind of association. If I get rid of the thing associated with a time in my life or an event in my life, it doesn't make that time in my life or that event in my life disappear. They still happened. I just no longer have the thing I was wearing at the time. There's also the sunk cost fallacy, which I talked about in a previous episode. Whenever I mention a previous episode or anything like that, I link to it all in the show notes at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. But I talked about the sunk cost fallacy. In the context of hoarding, it's I got to keep this because I spent good money on it in the first place. Now, I think everybody has this thought, hoarder or not. And it's a tricky one. And there's different ways, in my experience, to address this particular reason for why we're keeping clothes that no longer fit. One is that we spent the money then, and what we do with the item now makes no difference to the fact that 2 years ago or 20 years ago we spent money. Whether we keep it or not, we still spent that money. Two, if we got good use out of it, then that's what we spent the money on. And we got good use out of the thing we spent money on. So we can let it go feeling confident that we didn't waste that money. If we didn't get good use out of the item because we weren't wearing it, then that's more of a reason not to keep it. If we didn't wear it last time we were that size, why would we wear it if we become that size again? And also, I'm going to talk about potentially selling your clothes that no longer fit in a bit, but if it's a genuinely valuable item and you're worried about the financial side of it in particular, selling it is an option. It will be for less than you spent on it, but that's how time and valuation works. Selling is not the perfect solution, but it can be one tool in our tool belt. Another reason we keep things that no longer fit is feeling guilty about the waste. We feel wasteful in the first place, which doesn't feel good. And so then we feel guilty about being wasteful, which kind of compounds the negative feelings. But a bit like with the money we spent, any waste happened long ago. The only difference is, do we store that waste in our home indefinitely? Or do we get it out of our home, either to someone that will want it and use it, maybe donate it somewhere, maybe sell it, or if it's in poor condition, or if it's just not worth donating or selling, then to throw away, where we know it may end up in landfill or it may end up incinerated, but storing it in our home is not a valid alternative to that. We might not feel great about it ending up in landfill or in the incinerator, but that's not an argument for living with it forever, not least because when someone else ends up having to sort through all our stuff, it will almost certainly still end up in landfill or in the incinerator. And so the end result hasn't been avoided, it's just been delayed. And in the meantime, you've lived with it when you didn't need it or want it, just out of guilt. I run Dehoarding accountability Zoom sessions twice a month, where listeners of the podcast and I get together, usually with our cameras off, and we set our own dehoarding goal. Then we get on with our dehoarding in the knowledge that others in the virtual room are doing the same. There's something really powerful about the conversations we have in there, and if you'd like to join us, you can grab your ticket for the next one at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket. Sometimes we keep things that no longer fit just because we don't know what to do with them. And again, I will get onto that shortly, so hold that thought. We might be worried about the financial implications of replacing things if we need to replace them. That's valid. A lot of people are struggling financially at the moment. I think all around the world, there's difficult financial situations on an individual and home level in an awful lot of countries. And I'm not going to pretend that's not happening, because it is. I will say that what we might be imagining is if we go back to the size we recently were and we've got rid of our stuff, we will have to rebuy everything we've got rid of. But almost certainly we have an excess. And ideally, if we change sizes and have to start our wardrobe again, we will be buying considerably less because we know better. We will not be refilling 12 wardrobes. We will be refilling one. And it doesn't even have to be jam-packed full. In fact, ideally it wouldn't be. There are ways to reduce the financial burden of having to rebuy clothes if you go back to a previous size. There are ways of buying secondhand. There are ways of accessing donations. Some cities have clothing banks in the similar way to food banks. There are secondhand websites that are everywhere. In this country, Vinted is probably the biggest of those at the moment, but there's a whole range. And if we are living in a less hoarded home, that saves us money because we're not breaking things all the time. We're not rebuying things that we know we own but have lost. We're not paying late payment fees on bills because we lost the bill and didn't pay it on time. All of those kind of hoarding taxes will have been reduced, taking some of the pressure off our finances. And if we're managing to curb over-acquiring, that will also take significant pressure off your finances. So looking at why we keep clothes that no longer fit and what we might want to do about it does require us to be compassionate to ourselves. That it's okay to feel sad about a sense that we have wasted clothing when we find it in our previous size and the label hasn't even come off. When we find that something at the bottom of a pile is ruined and we didn't even know it would be. When we get rid of a lot of things and become hyper aware of just how much volume there has been. And we can notice those things and it's unpleasant to feel. But if we can approach ourselves with compassion and be a bit gentle with ourselves about that and about any other thoughts and feelings that come up as we're going through this process, it helps immeasurably. If we can validate how we feel, if we can say, okay, that's a bit odd, but I kind of understand where you're coming from, to ourselves, but also gently challenge how helpful it is to want to keep 300 tops and 150 pairs of jeans in a size we are not anymore. That can help us through this process. So for the last while, I don't know how long, I have been selling bits and bobs initially on eBay, and then as I moved more to clothes, I've been selling more on Vinted, just because that's where people buy secondhand clothes now. I've had a policy for a while that I can keep clothes that fit me currently, and then like one pair of trousers and one top, maybe two, in a size directly above or below where I am. I don't want to get to I know weight loss doesn't happen dramatically often, but I didn't want to get to a position where suddenly all my trousers were falling down or wouldn't do up and I had absolutely nothing to wear. So I felt reasonably safe knowing that I had something I could wear if I went up or down a size, but that I had given myself permission to get rid of most of everything else. And so I've been selling these things, and I'm now in a position where the things I've had an excuse to keep now no longer fit me. And this has been a bit of a challenge, but quite a helpful one, if I'm honest. And I am honest on this podcast, because it's made me realize that to some degree I was using this currently fits as an excuse to keep more than I probably needed to. So I've been selling things that didn't fit and keeping some of the things that did fit. And now those things that did fit do not fit, if you can follow. But you know what's great? I've talked many times about what I talk of as the dehoarding muscle and why it can be really useful to start with easy stuff. For us, what's easy for me will be different to what's easy for you. But to start with the easy stuff so that we can start gradually exercising and building that muscle where we've got used to getting rid of things and we've got used to being more careful about what comes in parts of our lives that feel easier. So that when we get to the bits that feel harder, those muscles are well developed and well practiced. And so while I've spent months selling all kinds of clothes, the prospect of selling the things I had relatively recently decided I should keep feels a little bit easier because I'm in a routine of selling clothes. I've been building that muscle over time. And that means selling at least some of the things that fitted me until recently is coming a little easier than if I hadn't been practicing with the things that definitely didn't fit before. So if you're struggling with getting rid of any clothes at all and you have a range of sizes, starting with the things that are 4 or 5 sizes away might be a good way that you can help yourself to justify why that's okay and why that feels safe and why that feels reasonable. If you're a size 12 and they're a size 18, it's easier to work out why that makes sense to get rid of. And through doing that, you're starting to work those muscles and starting to strengthen them so that when you get to closer sizes to where you are, it's that bit easier. We're not aiming, most of us, for complete overnight minimalism. That's not the goal. Gradual progress is often a lot more manageable and a lot less traumatic. And focusing on the process can help as well. Anything we achieve is an achievement. Throwing away one old sock, if you haven't thrown away any item of clothing for months or years, is a giant achievement that is worth giving yourself a pat on the back for. So celebrating those small wins helps a lot. The just in case thinking is a biggie for clothes that don't fit anymore. Try and gently talk yourself through the reasons it does make sense to not keep a majority of things around you on a just in case basis. Easy wins first helps you to build that muscle. And that's not just things that are significantly different size to where you are now. It's also the things that are just irretrievably damaged or overworn. You know, if they have a tear, if they are really stretched, like really baggy knees in your leggings, or they're unwearable, that's an easy-ish place to start. Similarly, anything that you look at that just doesn't make you feel good. You associate it with the job you hated, or you associate it with that really toxic relationship, or you associate it with being a size you would like to be and feel like you will never be again. Going back to the episode with Harriet where she talked about objects glowering at you. If any objects are glowering at you, they can go. If you're looking at clothes that don't fit, ask yourself questions like, would I buy this again? If I went back to this size, would I buy precisely this thing? And often the answer is no. Ask yourself, did it make me feel good when I was that size? Or was it just something I threw on a lazy day and it felt absolutely neutral or not that great? What kind of condition is it in, honestly? Would I wear it if it fit today? Does this fit my vibe, my look, even my lifestyle? Maybe you used to have an office job and now you're a yoga instructor. You need very different clothes for those two things. Ask yourself, do I have similar items? How many green hoodies does one person need? And this can be a good opportunity to check things out with friends, because even if they don't know you hoard, it's quite normal, I think, in a lot of friendships for someone to say, what would you do? And I feel like, would you keep a pair of jeans that was 2 sizes too small, but that you really, really loved? Can be a conversation that people who don't hoard have. If they do know you hoard, you can be even more honest. Thinking of what kind of space your wardrobe, your clothing should take up is a helpful parameter to have in mind. Okay, I might want to keep all of these things, but if a reasonable person would have one wardrobe full of clothes and maybe a chest of drawers full of clothes, what would I need to keep and get rid of for my clothes to take up that much space? That it can be good to have a parameter in mind. And so then what do we do with the clothes we decide to get rid of? If you want to help to support this independent podcast that is dedicated to spreading awareness and understanding of hoarding disorder and is really unique in what it offers, please do subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Leave a review and share it with your friends or anyone who might be interested. It all helps. Find out how to offer support at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support. And so then what do we do with the clothes we decide to get rid of? There are lots of different options. Some need to go in the bin. They are beyond repair, or they could be repaired, but you know you'll never get round to it. Or they're just not great. They're not great quality. Nobody would really want them. They're not that attractive. So let's talk first about donating clothes. This is a really popular way to get rid of clothes. I'm donating a lot of clothes as well as selling a lot. It's a guilt-free asterisk, I'll come back to that in a second, way of getting rid of clothes. It feels a lot less wasteful if you feel like somebody at the other end, whether that's through a charity shop, through a women's refuge, through a refugee centre, wherever you're giving the clothes to, somebody will get use of them. The reason I asterisked guilt-free is that we can't use donations as a way to get rid of things that are in terrible condition, but that we just don't want the guilt of throwing them away. Because charity shops and donation centres and everywhere else have better things to do than to deal with your pants with a period stain on. Some charity shops can sell unwearable clothes by weight, but some do not, and then you are adding to their costs because they then have to pay to get something disposed of. Similarly, if you're giving things away, don't turn your excess into somebody else's excess without their consent. Don't turn up at somebody's door with 8 bags of clothes and say, I think these would fit you, because then you're just giving them your problem to deal with. It's not fair on them. So be mindful and be conscious of what you're donating, who you're donating it to, and whether that's appropriate. Selling clothes is a real mixed bag. I did a whole episode, 115, on whether selling your stuff was worth it. And there's a veritable list of pros and cons. It's a pain. It creates work, and it can be an excuse to procrastinate. I can't get rid of this because I'm going to sell it. I can't get rid of this because I will list it on eBay. We've all said it. We've all said it and then not done it. And then we've got to go to the post office or got to go print off the labels and package things up. And it is a pain. On the other hand, you get some money. Something's going somewhere where it will probably be used. And you can get rid of your stuff. Since I made episode 115, I found another pro of selling your stuff, which is that if there's something I'm a bit hesitant about, but I list it for sale and then somebody buys it, it gives me a deadline. I've literally got to get it out of the house within a couple of days. Somebody's given me money for it. I've got no choice anymore, and it's taken out of my hands, and that's quite freeing and quite liberating. But if we're spending hours and hours and hours listing things for sale for £1, it's probably not worth the time we're putting in by the time we've taken the photos and, let's face it, moved all the clutter out of the way to take the photos, and then answered random queries and measured it for somebody who doesn't end up buying it and all of that stuff. So you've got to think about what's worth selling and whether you're just doing it to procrastinate. But selling is an option. Whether you're selling or donating, setting a deadline really helps. One of the ways I started selling rather than just putting things aside to sell at some point was by putting these deadlines in place where I will say to myself, I can sell this rather than give it away, but only if it's listed on the website by Friday. And if it's not listed by Friday, it goes in the donation bag. Those deadlines can really help. And do it gradually. You don't have to list 135 items for sale tomorrow. You can list 3, and then you can list 2 on Sunday and 4 on Monday, and then none on Tuesday and Wednesday. Take it a step at a time. And the things that need to go in the bin need to go in the bin. And we can feel sad about that, and we can acknowledge that we feel sad about that, and we can notice and pay attention to any regret we feel or any guilt we feel. But ideally, we need to do that without turning on ourselves viciously. We could say, it makes me really sad that I never wore this and then something spilt on it and it's such a waste. I feel really sad about that, but beating myself up achieves nothing. What I will try and do is keep how uncomfortable that feels in mind next time I'm tempted to overbuy. And then I will remember that feeling, and it might steer me away from overbuying in the future. And then, as well as dealing with the clothes that no longer fit us, the other dilemma I'm finding is what to do about needing clothes in our current size. It's tricky. If you are listening because your home is very full, and I know a lot of you are, there's a decent chance that you already have things that will fit. This isn't an excuse to go shopping. This isn't an excuse to go on a big spree. So start by shopping your own wardrobe. Something I've learned through doing this podcast is that one characteristic of hoarding is that we have all this stuff, but we don't engage with it. We don't interact with it. We don't touch it or use it. So we don't necessarily know what we have. And so shopping our own wardrobe, looking at what we've already got, seeing what would work, is a great start. And you might be planning to lose more weight or gain more weight. You might lose or gain more weight accidentally. So the added unsureness of how permanent this size is especially prescient when it's a recent change in size. And with that in mind, we don't need to buy every single thing for every single occasion in our new size, because we don't know if we're going to keep losing or gaining. We don't know if we're going to do either or both accidentally. At this stage, if we've recently lost or gained weight, we're hyper aware that our weight can change. So that can feel more tempting to hold on to everything. It can also feel more tempting to rebuy. So how do we handle those dilemmas? What do we do with that new set of feelings? So one thing I've been doing very consciously is only buying things in my new size as I need them. Because I don't know if I'm going back up, I don't know if I'm going more down. And I also know that in my previous size, I had excess, and I don't want excess in this size. So I haven't bought a party dress in my new size because I haven't been to a party. I have bought jeans in my new size because I need something to wear on a daily basis. And I mostly work from home, but then I had an important meeting a couple of weeks ago where I had to be smart. And so I bought one smart outfit in my new size. I'm resisting the urge to go on a big splurgy shopping trip for two reasons. One, I don't know if this size is permanent. It probably isn't. And two, I don't want to end up with just a different excess in a different size. We need to not reaccumulate the mass of clothes that we've ended up with. So delaying replacing your wardrobe can be useful. You probably need a couple of tops and a couple of bottoms for daily use. Go with those essentials. Make a note of what you actually wear. We can think we wear all kinds of things and then actually end up wearing the same skirt and the same pair of jeans and the same 3 tops on rotation the entire time. Having that pause before we buy, asking ourselves, is there room if I buy this? Asking ourselves, have I already got something that could serve the purpose I've got in mind here? Asking yourself, if I do bring this home, what am I going to let go of in return? Remembering that weight fluctuations can happen because of the time of the month, or because of our stage in life, or because we hurt our back and we can't do our usual exercise, or any number of reasons, and we can't have an entire wardrobe for every feasible fluctuation of weight. We deserve clothes that we feel good in. And that can be because of the fit, it can be because of the style, it can be because of what we believe it tells people about us. But it doesn't have to be a billion items that do that. It can be 2. It can be 3. I was talking before about having the parameter of how much space in an ideal world would I want my clothes to take up, and keep that visual image in your mind. I have 3 drawers and a wardrobe. If I buy this, does that fit with those parameters? And also the questions that we've talked about a number of times about avoiding overspending. Why do I want to buy this in the first place? Is it because I'm miserable? Is it because somebody just insulted me and I need a boost? Is it because I'm tired? Is it because my poor dopamine deprived brain needs something? I read about a challenge to wear clothes, at least any item of clothing, at least 30 times. So that can be another question to ask ourselves when we're considering rebuying. If I buy this, will I realistically wear it 30 times? Or actually, is it for that one party and that's it? Just as we don't have to get rid of all our old clothes in one go, we don't have to rebuy all our new clothes in one go. This is not the time to open the ASOS website and spend 600 quid on every feasible outfit we might need for the next 3 years. Starting gradually and saying, I've got clothes for everything I'd need in the next couple of weeks. I will deal with the rest after that, can help us to avoid overspending when we are newly in a new size. Whether we feel thrilled about being in that new size or devastated or completely neutral. I'm pretty neutral. about having gone down a size. I know it's something my body does sometimes. It's not something I take pride or shame in. It's just a thing. And keeping in mind always that letting things go doesn't have to be a devastating loss. Letting things go can be freeing. It can be liberating. It can allow us space to move and to live and to breathe.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
So shout out to the Struggle Care podcast with friend of the pod, Casey Davis, who you can also hear it on episode 82 of this podcast. And she's talking about adding one specific word to what you say to yourself in order to combat perfectionism. And this is also a tip that an attendee at the Dehoarding Accountability Zoom sessions has recommended as well. And I really like it. Have a listen.
One of my daughters did a preschool at this place that put a lot of emphasis on resilience. And they didn't call it that, but you could tell that that's what it was. And it's funny how simple it can be for little kids. I always thought that perfectionism was something that happened because of trauma. And I have now learned that truly some children come out of the womb with perfectionism, like hardwired. And so you're looking around the room at these little preschoolers, and one of the things that they would do is that anytime a child said, I'm not good at this, or I don't know how, they had this concept where they said, like, we want to teach you the magic word. And the magic word is yet. So anytime they said, I'm not good at this, instead of saying, yes, you are. Yeah, I like it, right? Which is really kind of suppressing and invalidating. They'd say, well, what's the magic word? I'm not good at it yet. And I was like, this is brilliant, because I spend so much of my time as a parent, because we feel so bad when we hear, I'm so bad at this, I'll never be good. Yes, I love it. It's so beautiful. And it's like, well, maybe there's a better way. And I just love that growth mindset of it's not good yet. Like, let's leave some possibilities open for that. And that was just such a simple way of them doing that.
So I will link to the Struggle Care podcast in the show notes, and try that this week. If you say, I can't do whatever, add yet and see how it shifts the dynamic of how you feel about yourself. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast.